Good evening and welcome to Spring Global and Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. President Muhammadu Buhari receives the President-elect Bola Tinubu at the Villa. BBC Chairman Richard Sharp resigns after being found guilty of breaching rules and securing a loan for then UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. 3 U.S. soldiers killed as 2 Army helicopters collide and crashed in Alaska. My name is Tunde Idowu. President Muhammadu Buhari this afternoon received the President-elect Bola Tinubu at the Aso Rock Villa, Abuja. The outgoing and incoming presidents prayed together at the presidential mosque, after which the president-elect departed without speaking to the media. Earlier, President Buhari had received the Kogi State Governor Yahaya Bello at the State House. Tinubu's visit to Buhari comes less than 24 hours after the president argued the opposition's defeat in the February 25 presidential election was as a result of overconfidence. And outside Nigeria, an attack on a military base in eastern Burkina Faso has killed 33 soldiers and wounded 12 others in the latest outburst of violence in the West African country. The army said in a statement that the besieged soldiers killed at least 40 terrorists yesterday before reinforcements arrived. Burkina Faso's armed forces have battled rebels since 2015, with the latest targeting the military detachment in Ouagadougou in the East region. According to estimates, more than 10,000 civilians and members of the security forces have died, while at least 2 million people have fled their homes. In the meantime, about 16,000 people have crossed the border from Sudan into Egypt, including 14,000 Sudanese citizens, according to a statement from the Egyptian Foreign Ministry, as Sudan's army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, agreed to extend the truce which started yesterday for 72 hours. In this report, Daniel Odemi takes a look at the crisis in Sudan and other developments since the new ceasefire.
The crisis in Sudan, which began some 14 days ago, is yet to be over, though an extended ceasefire had been reached. The fighting that erupted in the Sudanese capital Khartoum is a direct result of a vicious power struggle within the country's military leadership. As of last night, Sudan's army and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF paramilitary group, have agreed to extend the ongoing ceasefire for another 72 hours shortly before it was due to expire. The extension follows intensive diplomatic efforts by neighboring countries as well as the US, UK, and United Nations. The existing truce, which expired yesterday, has, however, not stopped the fighting between Sudan's army and the Rapid Support Forces, but created enough of a break for tens of thousands of Sudanese to flee to safer areas and for foreign nations to evacuate hundreds of their citizens by land and sea. But White House spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre later said that the situation could worsen at any moment, and the White House had urged Americans to leave Sudan within the next 24 to 48 hours.
We are working continuously to create options for American citizens to leave Sudan promptly because the situation could deteriorate at any moment, and we are communicating with citizens who have requested information about those options. Any option entails a degree of risk. But because the situation is unlikely to improve, we encourage Americans who want to leave to take advantage of the options that are available to them in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Jean-Pierre, who said that the administration was deeply concerned by an increase in ceasefire violations in Sudan, revealed that the United States had deployed intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets to support air and land evacuation routes, which Americans were using. On our part, the UK confirmed that almost 900 Britons have been evacuated from the country. Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs James Cleverly revealed that the UK was pushing hard for an extension to the ceasefire in Sudan to get more Britons home.
A ceasefire is due to elapse at midnight local time, and no one can predict the situation on the ground after that. We're encouraging those who who wish to travel to make their way to the airport today. We will continue to engage with our international partners to attempt to extend the ceasefire and bring a permanent end to the violence.
In a shocking development, a Turkish evacuation plane coming in to land at an air base outside Sudan's capital Khartoum was fired at, damaging its fuel system. Turkey's defense ministry confirms no one was injured and it landed safely at Wadi Sena, an air base 22 kilometers north of Khartoum, where it was being checked. Turkey's defense minister said efforts would continue to rescue Turkish citizens from Wadi Sena and the city of Port Sudan on the Red Sea coast. Meanwhile, as several African countries evacuate their citizens from Sudan, Nigeria, after days of uncertainty, yesterday began evacuating our citizens stranded in Sudan. Though there were initial challenges with reports of some Nigerian students getting stranded on their journey to Egypt, chairperson of NIDCAM, Abike Dabirerewa, revealed that the students would arrive the country today. In the midst of all this, there are concerns about refugees who had sought safety in Sudan and their chances of leaving the crisis-ridden nation. Many refugees are being left behind to fend for themselves as evacuation flights in Sudan continue to take foreign diplomats and citizens back to their countries or to safety in other nations. Videos circulating on social media platforms show Rohingya refugees as well as Yemenis and Syrians who are stuck in Sudan with no clear method of evacuation. Vulnerable refugees who had sought safety in Sudan are now desperately looking to leave the country. According to various United Nations agencies, the Sudan conflict has so far left hundreds of people dead, closed down more than 60% of hospitals, and led to the displacement of thousands of people. Daniel Odeyemi, Western Spring Television.
In the United Kingdom, BBC chairman Richard Sharp resigned this morning after an independent report found he breached rules by not disclosing a potential conflict of interest in his role in securing a $1 million loan for then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. His exit amid a cronyism row comes at a time of heightened political scrutiny of the publicly funded British broadcasters' impartiality. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, speaking to the media at the Scottish Conservative Conference in Glasgow, said he had not seen the report into Sharp. He asked about whether he could guarantee a non-political figure will replace Mr. Sharp. The Prime Minister said there was an appointment process that happened for this kind of appointment, adding that he was not going to prejudge that. However, the Labour Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell said the BBC was far too important for the government to appoint its mate to the board and to the role of chairman.
It's about doing things properly and professionally, and when concerns are raised, it's right that there is a proper process, an independent process, that we don't prejudge, we allow it to carry on, establish the facts of what happened, reach a conclusion. That's happened. Richard Sharp has resigned, but it's right that we do these things properly and professionally. I think most people will think that's the right thing to do.
Should his replacement be a non-political appointment, and are you sick and tired of clearing up Boris Johnson's mess?
You know, what I'm doing is focus on delivering for the British people. That's what I'm here talking about today in Scotland, how we can work constructively with the Scottish Government to deliver for the people of Scotland. Just this week, almost 750,000 Scottish people received direct financial support with the help with the cost of living, the most vulnerable in our society. When I was last here, we announced the creation of 2 new free ports. They're going to create jobs and attract investment here in Scotland. That's what I'm focused on doing, delivering for the people of Scotland and the rest of the UK.
But should the next person not be a non-political appointment?
As I said, right now I'm focused on talking to people here in Scotland about what we're doing to deliver for them.
Rishi Sunak and the Conservative government should have sacked him weeks ago, but I'm afraid this is a pattern we're now seeing time and time again, that they are more interested in saving their mates in these jobs, whether it's Dominic Raab or Owen Paterson or now Richard Sharp, than they are in doing the right thing for the country. And that's why I don't have faith. But what I want to see now is some very clear leadership from the government that they are going to put in place a truly independent and robust process to appoint his successor, so that we can never end up in this.
Meanwhile, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has met with Britain's Foreign Minister James Cleverly during a visit to London this afternoon. Mr. DeSantis has been on an international tour this week as he prepares to launch a 2024 presidential bid that will pit him against former President Donald Trump for the Republican nomination. The UK Foreign Ministry said the Foreign Secretary met Governor Ron DeSantis in London today to discuss the close and important partnership between the UK and Florida. The ministry said the meeting was an opportunity to strengthen ties with the fourth largest U.S. state and support bilateral economic cooperation that is already worth more than £5 billion a year. Still staying with the UK, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has praised the work undertaken by her British counterpart Rishi Sunak to fight people traffickers and clandestine immigration network. As two of the most prominent right-wing leaders in Europe met in Downing Street at the start of a two-day visit designed to deepen relations between the two governments, Meloni said the meeting with Sunak marked a new beginning in relations between Italy and Britain. While Mr. Sunak, on his part, praised her for bringing stability to the Italian economy, adding that the two sides are hoping they can form a deeper alliance, straddling defense, Ukraine, migration, and trade.
Giorgia, it's wonderful to welcome you to London to discuss the friendship between our two countries. And it's a friendship that's built on decades of collaboration in the G7, in NATO, but also the close links between our people, our economies. And on that note, I wanted to pay tribute to you for your very careful handling of the Italian economy, which has brought stability in uncertain times. And I think the values between our two countries are very aligned.
I'm very happy of being here today, and I think there is a great job that we can do together. We have nations that, as you said, they have a strong partnership since decades, but I think there is much more that we can do on many topics on which we are on the same side. Defense, Ukraine. What is happening in Ukraine means if we don't fight with Ukraine.
And to the Russia-Ukraine war, the death toll of a series of nighttime air raids in different cities and regions across Ukraine, including the capital, Kiev, rises to 19. Rescue workers are still searching for survivors after hours of the first large-scale assault in months. As of this afternoon, at least 17 people were killed in the central city of Uman and several others wounded when a missile hit an apartment building. President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a post on Telegram, said the Russian terror must face a fair response from Ukraine and the world. Meanwhile, the Russian Ministry of Defense says its forces launched long-range, high-precision strikes overnight on Ukrainian Army Reserves units and that all designated targets had been hit. Meanwhile, Ukraine is wrapping up preparation for a counter-offensive against Russian forces and is largely ready for it to go ahead. Ukraine's Defense Minister Oleksiy Zednikov, in an online news briefing this morning, said as soon as the weather and a decision by commanders, it will carry it out. He gave no date for when the counter-offensive will start, but said globally speaking, the army was to a high percentage ready. Kiev hopes its planned counter-offensive will change the dynamics of the war that has raged since Russia invaded Ukraine 14 months ago. Elsewhere, Pope Francis has arrived for a 3-day trip in Hungary, where he plans to discuss the war in Ukraine and migration during talks with Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Mr. Orban has previously said Hungary and the Vatican are the only two European states that can be described as pro-peace regarding the war in Ukraine. The Prime Minister, in a tweet, said in troubled times like this, it is essential to remember what keeps us together, and faith is the foundation upon which a stable future can build. Moving on, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has cancelled his election appearances for a third day after falling ill with what officials described as an intestinal infection. Mr. Erdogan is seeking a third presidential term in Turkey's May 14th election. He had been due to appear at a bridge opening and a political rally in the southern city of Adana, but his schedule changed this morning to show he will attend the opening ceremony via video link. Mr. Erdogan became ill during a TV interview on Tuesday with what the health minister Farrington Coker later said was a gastrointestinal infection. His election rallies planned for Wednesday and Thursday were cancelled. He looked pale yesterday as he inaugurated a nuclear power plant via video in his first public appearance since his illness. You're watching Spring Global and Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this break. Please stay with us.
Ahmadu Bello, Prince Royal, was born 6th of December 1910 at Raba Village, Sokoto, northwestern Nigeria. His father was a district head and heir apparent to the Sultanate throne from the house of Usmanu Danfodio, a religious and social reformer who brought the Habib dynasty under the Fulani Caliphate in the beginning of the 19th century. Ahmadu Bello raised the bar of political consciousness and participation when, in 1944, he engineered the establishment of the Northern People's Congress (NPC) as the first political party in northern Nigeria and the rallying point for politicians in the region before independence. History will not forget Ahmadu Bello for his charisma and political sagacity, which provided easy passage for his kinsmen to assume political and administrative positions in Nigeria's post-independence era. The distinguished elder statesman and Sardauna of Sokoto has his face on his country's 200 naira currency as a mark of honor to one of the architects of Nigeria's independence. Western Spring Television identifies Ahmadu Bello as a watershed character in history.
Thank you for staying with us and welcome back. Moving over to other stories. 2 U.S. Army helicopters collided and crashed in Alaska while returning from a training flight, killing 3 soldiers and injuring a 4th. The Army, in a statement yesterday, said 2 of the soldiers died at the scene of the crash near Healy, Alaska, and a 3rd died on the way to a hospital in Fairbanks. The commanding general of the 11th Airborne Division, Major General Brian E. Phil, said the cause of the crash was under investigation and more details will be released as soon as they are available. According to a spokesperson for the U.S. Army, Alaska, John Pennell, HAH-64 Apache helicopter was carrying 2 people at the time of the crash. This is the 2nd accident involving military helicopters. And in Asia, giant panda Yaya, who lived 20 years at a United States zoo, is back in China after a controversy over her health played out against the backdrop of a souring relationship between Beijing and Washington. Yaya arrived in Shanghai on a special flight yesterday after pictures emerged online of Yaya looking thin and bony. China has long operated a program for panda diplomacy through which the animals are loaned for a limited time to zoos around the world as a symbol of friendship. According to the Global Times, China currently has 60 giant pandas on loan to countries around the world. Authorities said Yaya will be in quarantine for 30 days before she is transferred to Beijing Zoo. And still in Asia, Russia has criticized the nuclear agreement between the United States and South Korea, saying it will destabilize the region and the wider world. The United States had on Wednesday pledged to give South Korea more insight into its nuclear planning, while Seoul promised not to seek nuclear weapons itself in an agreement both sides said was aimed against North Korea. Russia has repeatedly rallied against what it sees as the United States' growing military presence across Asia. Russia's foreign ministry in a statement said the development was clearly destabilizing in nature and will have serious negative consequences for regional security. The ministry said the United States and NATO's drive for decisive military superiority will bring nothing but escalating tensions and could provoke an arms race. Moving on, the United Nations Security Council has unanimously condemned a ban by the Taliban on Afghan women working for the United Nations in Afghanistan, calling on Taliban leaders to swiftly reverse a crackdown on the rights of women and girls. The resolution drafted by the United Arab Emirates and Japan described the ban as unprecedented in the history of the body, saying it undermines human rights and humanitarian principles. The resolution also asserts the indispensable role of women in Afghan society. The UNSC vote comes days before a planned international meeting regarding Afghanistan in Doha on May 1 to 2nd. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres will convene a closed-door meeting with special envoys on Afghanistan from various countries to work on a unified approach to dealing with the Taliban. In the Middle East, tens of thousands of right-wing Israelis have taken to the streets of Jerusalem to show their support for the controversial legislation by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, which will see the country's highest court stripped of much of its power. Israelis remain polarized over the planned legislation that the government says is necessary to rein in a judiciary that wields too much power, but critics say it removes a crucial check on those in power. Crowds of people, many carrying Israeli blue and white national flag, which has also been used as a symbol of the protest against the planned legislation, could be seen outside Israel's parliament. Mr. Netanyahu last month delayed the overhaul after 16 weeks of mass anti-government protests intensified, bringing Jerusalem and Tel Aviv to a standstill. In other news, the Bank of Japan, BOJ, kept ultra-low interest rates this morning, but announced a plan to review its past monetary policy. The move lays the groundwork for new Governor Kazuo Uda to gradually phase out his predecessor's massive stimulus program. While maintaining its commitment to patiently maintain ultra-loose policy, the central bank removed a pledge to keep interest rates at current or lower levels. In a news conference, Mr. Uda said the broad-based review won't be tied to near-term policy shifts and stressed the need to wait for more evidence to conclude inflation will sustainably achieve its 2% target. Meanwhile, Norway plans to nationalize most of its gas pipeline network when many existing concessions expire in 2028 in a move to tighten control over key infrastructure. Norway has become Europe's largest supplier of gas following a drop in Russian gas flows, which it supplies via a network of pipelines stretching some 5,590 miles. The Oil and Energy Ministry said this morning it was sending a letter to licenses signaling the state aims to make use of the right of repatriation at the end of the license period. The ministry stated that the state wants complete state ownership of the central part of the Norwegian gas transport system without giving reasons. And moving over to some sports stories, Ferrari's Charles Leclerc took pole position in Baku for the third year in a row in qualifying for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix this afternoon. The pole in a session twice red flagged due to crashes was Ferrari's first of the Formula One season and ended Red Bull's run of 3 succession. Red Bull's championship leader, Max Verstappen, qualified second fastest with his teammate Sergio Perez third. Drivers will have another qualifying tomorrow for a standalone 100-kilometer sprint race that no longer determines Sunday's grid after a new format was agreed unanimously by teams this week.
Yes, feels good. Thanks for everything, guys. The car was good. It's good to be back on top.
Before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. President Muhammadu Buhari this afternoon received the President-elect Bola Tinubu at the Aso Rock Villa, Abuja. BBC chairman Richard Sharp resigned this morning after an independent report found he breached rules by not disclosing a potential conflict of interest in his role in securing a $1 million loan for then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. 2 U.S. Army helicopters collided and crashed in Alaska while returning from a training flight, killing 3 soldiers and injuring a 4th. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. I am Tunde Ido. Good evening.